Though it might seem counterintuitive, branching out and taking on more things, more artistic mediums, and more creative outlets can actually be a wonderful thing for you as an artist. This is part two of an unintentional mini-series on the topic. In the last episode, we talked specifically about skills and versatility and adaptability, some of the actual tangible physical benefits that you might receive from branching out and embracing more artistic and creative mediums other than just your painting or your drawing. In this episode, however, we are going to take a look at some of the holistic and emotional benefits of branching out and taking on more than one artistic or creative medium. A broader form of self-expression, personal connection, artistic self-care, and long-term sustainability as an artist. My name is Zach, by the way. Thanks for coming along on this episode. And if this kind of discussion and things like this seem like your cup of tea, please consider liking and subscribing. And we're going to go ahead and dive straight in. So I want to start with the fact that utilizing more than one creative or artistic medium allows you a broader means of self-expression. And self-expression is one of those funny phrases that I find gets thrown out a lot in really artistic circles, but I don't stumble upon it a lot here on this platform. I think a lot of the video content on YouTube is particularly built on skill development, on becoming a better drawer, a better painter. Most of the videos that we see are usually quippy titles, things about, 10 tricks that will help you become a better artist or 30 days to become a better drawer. There's a place for those things. I'm not disparaging them. They are beneficial. But for a lot of people, in fact, for most of us at some base level, I would argue, the purpose of our art is a means of expression. It might be a means of dealing with traumatic things that have happened in our lives. It might just be a means of getting things down on the page. Some people have an easier time writing, journaling, speaking, and other people have an easier time drawing, painting, putting things down in some artistic expression. I mean, look around at all the memes that we have, even though some of them have very dubious and artistically questionable, depictions of things. They're still an art in their own form, and they communicate things differently, just like comics do and political cartoons have for ages. A drawing illustrates things in a different way and gets things across to humans in a different way. As artists, we often have a lot of things that we want, and in some cases that we need to say. It's likely you cannot say everything that you want to through drawing alone or through writing alone, and sometimes song and story are better mediums at expressing things. So when you put time into music, when you put time into writing, into journaling, these kinds of things are going to naturally affect your creative processes when it comes to art. So if you are having kind of an inkling that I really want to do these other things, but I feel like they're going to distract from my artwork. I really want to write a book, to work on a comic, which maybe you don't see as being artistic in the same way. I would encourage you to explore those things, or at the very least, not to think of them as being totally separate, totally disparate from your artistic and creative exploits, because they are going to bring different things to the table. When you work on journaling and on writing, you're exploring often just a stream of consciousness. You're sorting through thoughts, through feelings, through ideas, concepts, and they're coming down onto the page. Once they're on the page, they can be manipulated and they can be managed in different ways. And those same ideas will often come back into your art. I very seldom find people that are engaged in many artistic avenues. They write, they compose, and then they also draw or paint. I very seldom find that those things don't overlap in some way. You don't usually find somebody that writes really, really happy songs and then their art is super dark. That's a really oversimplification, obviously. But there's usually some overlap in those things. The kind of songs that I write, if I were to put them here on the channel, I don't think that they would be stylistically discordant to the kind of work that I produce. There's weird senses of humor in songs that I put together. There's a darkness, but also a goofiness and a hope. And we see a lot of that in a lot of the work that I produce. My robots are kind of funky, but there is a darkness behind some of them. A lot of the journeys that my little witch character went on with the Inktober drawings last year, there's kind of a funny, goofy darkness to all of that. I find that most of my artwork overlaps in some way, and that sometimes things that I can't express adequately in my drawing, I can express better in a story or in a song. So again, this is something that you might have to detach yourself from, this idea that everything needs to be efficient or productive in the same way. Sometimes art is just a thing that you do because you enjoy it. And that actually takes me into the next point here, is fulfillment. That art brings joy. And in its full purpose, it always has some component of this joy. We get fulfillment through our artwork when we are allowing ourselves to do the things that we need to do. And for many of us, that does include some sense of exploration. Obviously, there's a sense of improvement. I feel satisfaction when I'm growing as an artist. I know many of you do as well. But there is also some satisfaction in just finishing a thing, in accomplishing a thing, in getting something through in your piece of work. And as you diversify the things that you do, as you allow yourself to move into other things, you don't bind yourself just to drawing, just to painting, just to sculpting. If you allow yourself to stretch out into other artistic mediums, if you allow yourself to stretch out into storytelling in whatever form that takes, you may find that your joy expands. And as I often come back to on this channel, I think joy is an integral component of the artistic journey if you want to do this for a long time. And again, joy is often what got us into it in the first place. So I would say that my biggest focus artistically, creatively actually, I'm going to use the word creatively, is on my art. It's on my drawings and my paintings. And primarily it's on the storytelling aspects of my drawings. However, I also compose music. I also write stories, and I just finished the first draft of my novel, and I'm starting to plug away at the first couple chapters of it right now and realizing like I'm gonna have to rewrite all this. But I'm really glad that it exists because now it's editable. It's like a sketch or a thumbnail that can be modified now, which is lovely. But I find that my biggest focus is on storytelling. And for me right now, that's coming out in my artwork, on the work that I do here on the YouTube channel. In the future, I don't know which way that will go. I will always be drawing and painting. I don't think that I can get through life happily without doing those things. But there is a conceivable point in the future where, writing becomes the predominant thing that I do. I actually do a lot of writing for this channel. I don't script out every single thing that I say for these podcasts and for the sketchbook sessions, as you can tell by my ums and likes sometimes. But I do outline and research and script things, and I frequently abandon scripts because it seemed like a good idea, and then I put 2-3 hours into it and it doesn't go anywhere. So for me, my joy comes from getting the story across and from helping other people and connecting other people through those kinds of mediums. And so I have tried in the last couple of years to allow myself to branch out, to do things. In fact, writing my novel, I think there was a sense of giving myself permission to finally do it. There was part of me that had stayed away because I was scared. And I think there was part of me that also went, that's kind of frivolous. It's going to take a long time. Maybe you can't do it, which is just more fear, I suppose. But there was an element of giving myself permission to do it. And fortunately, with so much time invested in drawing in the last couple of years, I understand that a failed drawing is just a step on the path. In the same way that a failed chapter or a failed paragraph is just a stepping stone. In a lot of ways, when I write a bad chapter, when I make a bad sketch, I just know that that direction isn't a good direction for me right now. That the characters wouldn't talk like that. That I don't like how these shapes communicate the form. And so I've managed in a lot of ways to gain benefits from both of those mediums. And I've gotten a lot more joy out of it in the process. So I would encourage you as a means of self-expression, don't limit yourself to just a single medium, a single thing. You will often find more joy by reaching out and trying other things. So I want to take just a second here and mention relaxation and like decompressing too, because for me, and this might just be a me thing, but I think it's beneficial to throw these things out there sometimes because I never know who this is gonna land with. Art is not often de-stressing for me. And if you are like me in that sense, where art often gives you some small level of stress and anxiety, and then you feel the sense of accomplishment when you finish a thing, But you hear stories about, and you hear from, people in the comments sections and on other videos about how art is always this blissful thing. It can be a little discouraging. You can think maybe something's wrong with you, that you're broken, that you're not supposed to do this artistic thing. And that's just not true. Like, we're not all the same. So for me, the thing that really de-stresses me creatively is playing guitar and writing songs. I don't know why. It's so much less stressful, and I often forget. Like, I'll be putting a ton of time into writing either scripts or books and stories, or working on artwork, and nothing feels like it's going well, and I'm super stressed. And only about one time in 10 do I remember, like, oh, I should go sit down for 10 minutes and just play my guitar. I should go write a song, or I should go sing a little bit. And it's amazing, but 10 or 15 minutes of that, and I feel like I just had a nap, like I've had a soft reset on my mood and where I was. So for me, there are moments where I feel like art should be de-stressing for me, but it's usually not. It's not always a stressor, but those are different things. So for me, I engage in music partially because I love it and there's a lot of joy in it, but because it allows me to kind of calm down. And so if you find that your artwork is a stressor for you, something you still love, but it's a stressor, it can be really good to kind of branch out and try to express yourself in another way. A lot of my friends, this is by journaling or writing, that they're writing, they feel like it has no stakes, so they can do that to de-stress from their art, or that they can engage in journaling, which I'm really bad at journaling. It's a really good thing to do. And so I would encourage you, just if you find that sometimes you, like me, are stressed or made anxious by your artwork, sometimes another artistic medium will actually be less stressful. And for some people, this is, I was working a whole bunch in paint today, and so I went and drew a bit. So I want to throw that out there because I don't hear it talked about a lot. For me, I feel like it's kind of weird, and maybe it's not, but I don't know because I haven't talked about it much, and I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about it. So let me know in the comments below if you find that one medium is stressful and another is de-stressing, and you kind of go back and forth. I would just love to know this about some other people other than just myself. Lastly, here with the means of self-expression, art is not such a simple thing. Sometimes the same things can be expressed in multiple ways. So stories can be told through art. They can be told through music. They can be told through writing. And I think we often have a tendency to limit ourselves kind of unconsciously by the medium that we spend the most time in. You know, for me, for example, I have a storyline about a bunch of little robots that are stuck underneath a glacier in Siberia, and a weird post-apocalyptic alternate history. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but they're cute. You know, you're watching part of the robots take place here. And in that story, I've tried many times to illustrate it, and it just doesn't quite go. And I think that it's gonna really make sense as a comic at some point. But the place that story really got its roots and really got momentum was I started writing a whole album of songs that is just about the characters telling their stories. And so don't limit yourself to think that your story, your tale, your vision has to be confined to one thing. It's very easy to get wedged into that, but you can branch out. You can try different things. You can try to come at it from different angles and understand that all of them are legitimate. If you have something that you need to say, that you want to say and tell the world, it doesn't really matter how it comes out. So don't be afraid to try different means of expressing yourself. The next thing I want to talk about is personal connections, connections with other people. When you are stuck to a single thing, you just sculpt, there is an element of you feeling like you need to find other sculptors to work with. And I think that's beneficial. When I have other people in my life who are ink drawers, if we're going to really hone in on a single thing, it is beneficial to talk to them. But I've found that communicating with other artists in general, like artists on the Discord community who don't all work in the exact same medium that I do, artists that I worked with a long time ago that I went to school with, you know, old colleagues, old students, they don't all do the same things that I do. But when I engage in other artistic mediums and allow myself to do other things, I find that I glean interesting things from these other people. You know, the people that I play music with, I learn things about their artistic processes, and I have them as resources as other creative humans. I have a local writing group that I'm a part of. And while only a couple of them are actually artists, they're all writers in some capacity. Some are writers in a technical sense, some do it for work. We've got a journalist as part of the group, and a bunch of us are working on random short stories or novels. I have an awesome sense of community with those people, and fortunately, a great deal of respect from them for the artistic things that I do as well. And that community, that networking is not only beneficial to me as a human, but it's beneficial to me as an artist, primarily because it's so unisolating. It makes me feel like, oh, other creative people exist. They exist in my realm. And if I were to limit myself to just my artistic mediums, to sticking to those things, I wouldn't have built that community. I wouldn't have the group of artists that I work with musically, and I wouldn't have the group of writers that I work with. All of those things have made my life better. They've made me feel less isolated, and they've given me other sounding boards for ideas. And honestly, like, I don't worry about this a ton, but I know for a lot of the people in that group, it makes them feel like they're not strange or weird for being the creative person. And that's really, really beneficial because being a creative can sometimes be very isolating. So, meeting creatives in different fields with beneficial information or skills to what you do, you get the friendship out of it. It's just a wonderful thing. And sometimes when you isolate, when you focus just on your singular artistic thing that you do, you can limit yourself from some potential groups where you could really help some of those other people and they could really help you. They could be your new artistic clan, even if you're the only sculptor in the group, even if you're the only painter in the group. It doesn't really matter. The next thing here is artistic self-care. Now, I've talked about this in a couple different places before, but I think that this is a really beneficial thing to talk about when it comes to the benefits of branching out, of not limiting yourself to a single thing. We have a tendency to wedge ourselves into a box. And when you are naturally allowing / forcing yourself to break out of that space to try different things, you can also detach yourself from stigmas, especially negative ones that you've wedged upon yourself. But there are cognitive benefits as well. It's stimulating and it opens new pathways in your mind, allows you to find different ways of progressing and different ideas from different things. Obviously, when you start writing a short story, it's going to force you to think in a slightly different way than if you were just diving into your 17th painting this month. If you are jumping from painting into drawing and you're working with things that really can't be layered, then you have to come at things a little bit differently. For me, with painting, I got so used to the fact that I could layer indefinitely that I wasn't particularly careful about some of my underlayers. And there's a virtue to that in some sense. But when I focus more on drawing and then jump back to painting, I find that I allow myself the time to be more precise with the things that really matter. And this is something that really has a certain stylistic emphasis to my paintings that has just emerged in the last couple years, partially from me trying so many different things. I used to have paintings that were pretty, amorphous from painting to painting. And I just mean that in the sense that the style was not very consistent. Nowadays, most of my paintings are fairly consistent. Like if I put 15 of them up, you would know that they were all done by the same person. And that happened slowly over time, but it's kind of been a wonderful thing to see because we all feel like in our youth we have to chase this elusive thing called style. And stumbling upon it via trying out a whole bunch of new things is really, really good. So there have been some benefits to me. That stimulation from trying the other things has been really lovely. Some people experience this with walking, with working out, or simply activities that are different from their norm as well. So although it strays a little bit from the topic of this podcast, I felt like throwing that out there might be a good thing, that, just engaging in activities that are a little bit different. If you're trying to put tons and tons of time into creative things, sometimes breaking out of that and going for a walk, going and sitting outside for a few minutes, just, looking at what's happening in the world around you can sometimes put you in a much better headspace, and it can benefit your brain because you take a few minutes and you stop thinking. I find often that if I'm writing a little bit or I'm working on something artistic, or even if I'm putting a script together and then I go for a run or a walk, my brain kind of subconsciously sorts through and sifts through some of the things that were a struggle for me, an hour ago. And I do a lot of my problem solving on long drives when I've got no one to talk to. And I've been told that this is not normal, but I will often do that without any music or anything. I'll just be in the car in silence. And I find that letting my mind have peace, I can sometimes solve these problems that have been eating at me for a while. There are emotional benefits too from an artistic self-care standpoint. An outlet, sometimes the things you do for work or even hobby carry their own stresses, and you might escape some of them by engaging in others, but, still creative kind of things. So again, I mentioned this with music earlier for me. For some reason, cognitively, I've got less stress attributed to my musical work. And so it is something that allows me to detach and to refocus myself. So if you feel like painting is your big artistic thing, and it's going to be a drain then sometimes, even if you love it most of the time. If it's your big thing, subconsciously, unconsciously, your brain is going to attribute some pressure to it. So engaging in a different creative thing can be really relaxing. You're kind of going back to that childhood state when just scribbling on a page was relaxing and fun. And if you can reclaim that by doing something that is just enough detached in your mind from the thing that is your main thing, it might be really beneficial to you. I think that the robots were this for me a lot of the time. It's very different when I sit down at my dining room table to draw a couple robots versus when I sit down at my drawing table with the camera going to draw my robots. I think about things like, well, I really want to move the sketchbook to the side because these lines are going to be easier to draw if my wrist is allowed to move vertically. But then I have to immediately counter that with, okay, but do I have to edit that chunk out in post? Is that, really that good for people who are watching? And I try to leave some of that in because it's authentic. It's the reality of drawing. You can't draw everything from the same angle. Our wrists, rotate in certain ways. But the fact that I think about those things means that there's a certain level of stress and of cognitive work that has to be done while I'm in the middle of my drawing. So for me, I can work in the same medium, but it's the environment that changes the level of stress. So I just want to throw that out there because it might be something that might be helpful for you as well. The last thing here is try to detach from expectations. As you spread your wings into new things, you often have more reasonable expectations at first because you don't have months or years of backlog thinking and work to accompany you. So again, if you focus on a single artistic thing and you jump into something new, some people will just attribute all the same expectations that they had. But for a lot of people, there is the sense that this is adventuring, that this is new. I expect my paintings to turn out well, but I'm not going to expect, learning the ukulele to turn out well right away. And if you are that kind of person, the kind of person that can jump into a new creative endeavor and not have the stress and the level of expectations, then it's probably something that you need to exploit. It's probably a really lovely beneficial aspect about your humanity that you can lean into and really benefit from. So this for me is something that I run into right at the beginning of a new hobby. And generally once I get into it a little bit, my expectations skyrocket and then I'm really disappointed. But if you can avoid that part, I would highly encourage you to do so. It can be a really good way to take care of yourself as an artist, to make sure that you have other creative outlets that give you a break from your main one, which means you can stick to your main one more, you can progress more there, feel that satisfaction, but also have the joy and the relaxation from whatever else you're doing adjacent to it. The last category for this episode, and perhaps the most important thing, is long-term sustainability as an artist. We are always changing as human beings, and perhaps more as creative human beings. And allowing yourself the freedom to adapt, the freedom to try new things, to not be wedged into the same peg for your entire life, is going to be massively beneficial to you. Trying new things can keep everything fresh, can make it easier to stick with art in general, or can give you the break you need before diving back into something you spent tons of time working on. I've been thinking about sustainability with art recently, and I think in a lot of ways in the community this is talked about when it comes to the professional realm. How do you keep yourself in it for a long time, because it's going to take a long time to really build up your community, to build up your economics and your revenue and your income streams and all that. That's very true. But I'm also predominantly thinking about this for hobby artists, for people that do it because it's fun, because it makes their lives better. And there's the similar problem of sticking to it for a long time, that sustaining yourself as an artist, allowing yourself the freedoms to stick to it long enough to see the results that you want to see. It's really, really hard. And this has come up a lot in my episodes recently concerning like artistic journeys and North Stars and things. I think they're all kind of honing in on that same thing, that the art journey is long and that it's worth it. It's a good thing to do, but it's really, really long. And it's actually, I think, longer than it is hard, because yes, it's difficult, but it's predominantly difficult, I think, because of how much time you have to stick to it. And maybe the people that are geared in on being creative in general just have a tendency to be a little bit less patient. That's been my experience. I don't know if it's an overarching thing, but maybe let me know in the comments. Do you struggle with patience with your artwork? I know I certainly do. So it's been a focus of my thoughts recently and a lot of my content here on the channel, because I have made tremendous progress in the last 2 years. But I've been on this artistic journey, I would say, for 30-something years. So it's a strange thing. It makes me wonder, is it the fact that you have to be on it for a while and you just magically see a shooting star one day and you get to, you get to jump on and then you accelerate? Probably not. I don't like to consider the fact that if I had approached my art as seriously back in the day as I am now, that I probably would have improved dramatically, but that's probably true. I probably could be a tremendously better artist now if I'd spent the time earlier. That's not a very productive place to spend a lot of time thinking, but I am very encouraged on the opposite side of this. I'm very encouraged by how much improvement I've made in the last couple of years, especially in proportion to how long I've been doing this as a whole. So the journey in general has just been on my mind a lot. I've been thinking about how long it needs to be, how long it should be, if there's ways to shear that down, what we mean as far as the art journey. Is it worthwhile having an art journey that never makes a dollar, that you are just, by the way, yes, that it totally is worth it. Don't run away if you don't think you can make any money. Art is, I think, what most of us would do as creatives if we didn't have to earn money. And I think there's something to think about in that if you really think about your life and what you would do if you had total freedom economically, most creative people would spend time with the people they love and they would make things. And if that's where you really would want to be putting your time, if there were no other tethers on it, it seems reasonable to me that you should do as much of that as you can, even given the present circumstances. So obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done in each of our daily lives, whether it's going to work and earning a paycheck, whether it's taking care of your kids, whether it's managing the house and the finances and all that jazz. We all have a lot that we have to do. But if at the end of the day, all of those things that we have to do would be supplanted by our creative endeavors because that's what we want to do, it's reasonable to start putting more time into those things now and start that journey. And yes, the journey will be long, but the journey will be worth it. And so I guess all of this is going back to the long-term sustainability. All of these thoughts are coalescing in some way in this weird brain of mine that we need to stick to it. I want to stick to it. I want you to be able to stick to it for a long time, because it's so difficult to know when you're going to jump over the threshold and get to this point where your joy just explodes outward. Like, I'm having way more fun with my art than I ever have. And I've got a 5-year-old and she's starting to pick up on that. And I'm in a position where she can hopefully grow up in a realm where, you know, artistic expression and the ability to create and build things is just as big a part of life as eating dinner. And I'm hoping as the community continues to build up here, as I hear from more people and see more people on the Discord server, I get lovely comments from people like you who are listening. It seems like these things are beneficial. And I think maybe I'm just excited. Like, I feel excited because I feel an epiphany somewhere in the near future that is probably doesn't exist, but it's probably just the like constant amount of time being put into this that yeah. So sorry, that was a lot of rambles about long-term sustainability as an artist. But we're far enough into the podcast that if you're still here, you're probably okay with my rambles. I guess if there was a reduction of it, it's just the journey is long, it's worth it, and sometimes branching out and allowing yourself to do other things artistically, other artistic mediums can keep you in the game longer. For the same reason that I talk about focusing on the things that bring you joy. The fact that I draw these robots because they make me happy and they keep me making things. And the more I make things, the better I am at making things, the happier I am, the more satisfied I am, the better husband I am, the better friend I am, the better father I am, etc., etc., etc. You should make things that makes you a better human. That's the end. No, not really. I've got to close it out, but that's kind of the end of like the point, I suppose. So as always, thank you for your time. Thanks for tuning in, especially to the last couple minutes of rambles. I appreciate all of you who listen to this. I appreciate your comments, your feedback. If you're looking for a little bit more personal connection that way with an artistic community, feel free to check out the Discord server. There's a link in the description down below. And if you're looking to support me here at the channel, there's a Patreon link down below as well. It gives you access to things ahead of time, the scripts and outlines for these. I will often post them, and I love getting feedback. If there's things that you would like me to include, to expand upon, to talk about, you can actually get your stuff into the videos there. In the future, there'll be things to vote on. You'll actually be able to choose some of the topics for sketchbook sessions and podcasts like this one. In that same train of thought, thank you to patrons Who, What, Where, When, and Pale Spider for your continued support. I appreciate it so much. And for all of you listening, I appreciate you listening and giving me some of your day as well. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.